I got these rocks. And if you're wondering why I'm holding them, the first thing I'll say is we probably haven't talked that much. And the second thing that I'll say is that that's okay. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. The first person to wonder about me holding these rocks was my mom. My boss continues to look at me on a regular basis and wonder why a person could need 5 rocks at a desk. And he won't be the last either. There are going to be more, and that's okay. I did my undergrad here at EMU in geology, and nobody is more surprised about that last part than me. I called my mom on a bright, sunny fall afternoon that I still remember to say, you know, I think I want to study rocks. And I did, and it was good. I got a job as a teaching assistant, and if you're still with me, this is the part that I'm really going to have to beg you to suspend your disbelief, because I'm going to tell you that my absolute favorite part about that job was teaching the lab about soil science. I just really liked it. And without going into too much detail, there was a part where we talked about the difference between the porosity of sand and gravel. And we asked students to make a prediction and write it down. At the end of the experiment, we said, were you right? And I taught that class for 5 semesters, which means that for 5 semesters, I watched students erase what they'd written earlier in the lab, so that next to the question, were you right, they could write the word yes, which is understandable. It's pretty human nature to want to be right. It goes against our nature to be wrong. But it does segue into what I think is a pretty important question, which is, why do we experiment? The short answer is that we experiment to learn. But the important corollary that I think sometimes we miss is that if we're going to learn, we need to feel comfortable and okay about sometimes being wrong. So here I am. I'm this teaching assistant. I'm getting ready to graduate and go out and change the world with rocks, which wasn't always what I wanted to do, but it was okay because it made me happy, until it didn't. And then all of a sudden, it was almost like a switch flipping, and it was intellectually rewarding, but it didn't feel meaningful, and I didn't feel like I was doing, I didn't feel a call or whatever, and I didn't know where to find it. And then I joined O-Team, and I spent a lot of time working with student staff and with professional staff to plan orientation, and I got to go to an orientation conference, NODA, that I think some of you in the crowd are going to soon. And on the way, Katie looked at me and said, have you ever thought about going into student affairs? And that was when I had to look at her and say a sentence that I'm sure that a lot of us in this room by this point are pretty familiar with, which is, I have no idea what working in student affairs means. But she convinced me to apply for a job with Campus Life, and I did. And I loved it. So now I'm a counseling student, and I love it a lot. But it does put me in the position of having to introduce myself as a counseling student who has a degree in geology, which receives mixed responses. There's some confusion, understandably. I've had very well-intentioned people ask me, what would you do differently? I've had people ask me what it felt like to catch up. But I've also had some pretty good feedback. I've had supervisors tell me that I think differently. I've had people compliment the way I put together reports. I have enjoyed being in the distinct minority of people in the room who really just can't wait to sink their teeth into that assessment, which is nice. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that when we're talking about student affairs work, what I'm thinking of is, how does this fit into my life? There's a quote that I try to keep into the top of my mind when I'm going into work, especially when I'm at work, and I've been at work for a very long time, trying to crack something I can't wrap my mind around, and that's Isaac Asimov, who said that the true delight is in the finding out rather than in the knowing. And that was what I always said I loved about science, but what I'm learning is that it's also what I love about student affairs and about counseling. If we're at our A game, we're doing things right, but we're also doing things intentionally right. And to do things intentionally right, we have to know what's wrong. And we do that through experimentation, and that's science. And that is the beautiful, infinite, awe-inspiring thing that science can give us, which is just crack open this playing field and give us permission to make mistakes and to not get things right the first time around, which in a division where striving for excellence means making our programming better, making our systems better, making our service delivery better. The implications for that are huge. Because if you're anything like me, speaking frankly here, you make a lot of mistakes. And our jobs get easier if we can start learning to think of those mistakes as training grounds. So that's it. Thanks.